computer is broken. First off, I need to acknowledge something, which is that there are a lot of people here who thought that they were coming to, like, just a regular book signing. And so for those people, particularly the adults who have just started reading my books, I can't explain to you everything that's involved in this, but I can explain to you that I have a video blog with my brother. And all those videos start out, "Good morning, Hank, it's Tuesday," or whatever day it is, but it's usually Tuesday. So I'm going to ask you to say, "Good morning, Hank, it's Tuesday." Yeah, we're both experiencing anxiety from the screaming. So on three, yeah, you say, "Good morning, Hank, it's Tuesday," on three. Hold on, let me make sure this is working. It is 1, 2, 3. Good morning, Hank, it's Tuesday! Thank you. So, now we have to be reasonably quiet just for the benefit of the rest of the National Book Festival. I want to read you just a little bit from my new book, The Fault in Our Stars, talk a little bit about the book. But mostly I just want to answer your questions. I'm more interested in what you're interested in than what I'm interested in. And I generally think that what I love about books, both reading them and writing them, is that it's a conversation between a reader and a writer, and this is a chance for us to have that conversation IRL, which is very exciting to me. Does anyone have a copy of my book that I can borrow? Sorry, I'm very unprepared. I already signed this for you, Julian. I'm not signing it again. Thank you for coming to the event in was it in Maryland? It was at LeakyCon. Okay, it's nice to see you again, regardless. So I'm just gonna read a little bit of the book to try to give a sense of the voice, I guess. But I'm going to begin by reading the author's note, which is the only time in the book when I am directly speaking to you, so it feels like something that I can read to you and still sound like myself, maybe. This is not so much an author's note as an author's reminder of what was printed in small type a few pages ago. This book is a work of fiction. I made it up. Neither novels nor their readers, I see this as a first printing because it says neither novels or their readers, but that's been fixed. Neither novels nor their readers benefit from attempts to divine whether any facts hide inside a story. Such efforts attack the very idea that made-up stories can matter, which is sort of the foundational assumption of our species. I appreciate your cooperation in this matter. And this is the beginning of chapter 1. Late in the winter of my 17th year, my mother decided I was depressed, presumably because I rarely left the house, spent quite a lot of time in bed, read the same book over and over, ate infrequently, and devoted quite a bit of my abundant free time to thinking about death. Whenever you read a cancer booklet or website or whatever, they always list depression among the side effects of cancer. But in fact, depression is not a side effect of cancer. Depression is a side effect of dying. Cancer is also a side effect of dying. Almost everything is, really. But my mom believed I required treatment, so she took me to see my regular Dr. Jim, who agreed that I was veritably swimming in a paralyzing and totally clinical depression, and that therefore my meds should be adjusted, and also I should attend a weekly support group. So that's what I'm going to read. I'm going to return this to Julia. So I get a lot of questions about that very beginning of the novel. I wanted to answer that question while also maybe saying something else about the book and why I wrote it. The question that I get most often is that cancer is not a side effect of dying. Dying is a side effect of cancer, which is true in like a very narrow sense. But in the broader sense, cancer is a side effect of dying because cancer is a disease that is born of mutation. The reason cancer happens is because cells inside of our bodies mutate, and then whatever is supposed to turn off their replication ceases to turn it off, and there's out of control growth of this tumor. That is a side effect of dying, because the whole reason that mutation happens is because cells are always in the business of dying. Every cell in our body is constantly, well, with very few exceptions, and even those are dying in the broadest sense. All cells are dying. More generally, all organic matter at all times is dying, is in this process of sort of falling apart in the broadest sense. But it's also often in the process of coming together. So I have a 2.5-year-old son, and I've watched his body go from this thing I could hold in my, in my forearm to being this like squiggly thing capable of talking and asking me questions and making unreasonable requests of my time and all sorts of stuff. That process of coming from nothing into something and then slowly falling apart is the process of life. And I wanted to write about that as well as I could and as honestly as I could, and in a way that reflected the experience of the people I'd known and loved who'd lived with chronic illness and in many cases had died of it. And in my experience was that all of these things are a side effect of dying, and that our sort of cultural inability to acknowledge the reality and omnipresence of this falling apart represented a real sort of failure on our part to grapple with one of the most interesting parts of life. So I had that idea initially in like 2000. I was working as a student chaplain at a children's hospital, and I really wanted to write this story that was set in a children's hospital, and it starred this like super handsome hospital chaplain, kind of an alcoholic, and had a lot of troubles, but he was really cool, and all of his like bad qualities were made up for his like chiseled good looks and everything. And there were all these like hot lady doctors. Which hot lady doctor will he choose? Sort of the central question of this original manuscript. And I worked on that book in one form or another for 8 years. Just kept going back to it over and over again. I'd write it, sort of fail at writing it, and then I'd write a different book, and then I'd fail. I'd try and fail again, and then I'd write a different book, and this continued. But this was always the book I wanted to write, and in some ways, The Fault in Our Stars is my first novel. This is the novel that I wanted to write first. I just didn't figure it out. I figured it out in 2009, or 2010, I guess. I had all this stuff. I'd written, 100,000, 200,000 words, which is maybe like 600 pages, but it was all crap. It was all about this, mostly about this chaplain. So I finally found a way into it through my friendship with a young woman who was a fan of our videos and a fan of my books, named Esther. Really more a fan of our videos, I have to say. I was reading Esther's diaries recently, and I always say like she was a fan of my books, but it's not really true. And Esther had cancer from the time that I knew her, and she died in August of 2010 when she was just 16. And knowing Esther and knowing her family and being friends with a lot of her friends, it pulled me out of the story. It took me out of the story, and it allowed me to center myself in this question of why are we falling apart, and why do we fall apart at different rates So why is it that, like, my grandfather, who was a very nice guy, lived to be 93 years old and spent, saw all 7 continents and had this great full life, and Esther, who was also a very nice person, only lived to be 16, and for much of her life was circumscribed by this illness, by this chronic illness. And can we make sense of that world? Can we find a way to be hopeful in that world? Or are we best off just ignoring the reality? Because I think ultimately that's why we ignore this process of death that is constantly occurring inside of not just us, but in the planet itself. The planet itself is a kind of organism that is constantly, being born and falling apart and experiencing this same cycle. Do we ignore that because it is so, the reality of it, the reality of illness in children, the reality that not all lives are long lives is so unacceptable to us that we just can't even look at it? And was there a way for me to write a story that made it okay to look at? Because my experience with being friends, not just with Esther, but with the other young sick people I've known, is that it is not hard to look at them, and it is not hard to love them. It is not hard to love that reality. And that was, but you have to be brought into the place where it's okay and not scary to love and to look at the world as it is. And the sentimental maudlin cancer stories that I have read when I was a young person and make fun of a lot in this book, don't do that for me. Like, they don't take me into that place of love and respect. They take me in, they're really about the well people in the novels, not the sick ones. Because really what they're about is they're about that attempt to try to, that whole idea that people with cancer, particularly young people with cancer, exist so that the rest of us can learn important life lessons, right? So the rest of us can be grateful for every day. No, that is not why sick people exist. And that dehumanizes them and depersonalizes them and makes the story not about them but about the well, and I didn't want to do that. I wanted to argue that a short life can also be a full life, and can also be a good life and a rich life, and that the definition of a rich, full life is not about whether it's long, although certainly it's easier and better if it is long, but it's about different kinds of good. And so I wanted to present in Hazel and Augustus different kinds of good lives, different ways of imagining what constitutes a good life, what constitutes a heroic life. And now, 9 months after the book has come out, I haven't read it, but lots of people have been very nice about it. And the main thing that I want to say is that all the time that I was writing that story, I was terrified. I was terrified that I wasn't doing justice to a story that was in many ways, not mine. I was terrified that I wasn't being, that you weren't going to like it. I was terrified that people would say, oh, a book about cancer, that sounds horrible, because that's what I say when people say, oh, a book about cancer. I'm not the kind of person who's like, ooh, really? Can I read a book about cancer? How lucky am I now? There are a lot of people in this room who read the book very early and recommended it to their friends and to their family, and in many cases to their parents. And that means a lot to me, and that has brought, in the end, writing the book did not bring me the peace I was after. But living with the book today has, in many ways, brought me that sense of peace and that conviction that there are many kinds of good and full lives. So I want to thank you.